So this is our plaster room. This is where everything really begins as far as fabrication goes. We start typically by taking some kind of an impression of the person's limb. If it's a brace, it's an intact limb. If it's an amputee, their residual limb. So I'm holding here in my hand a couple of molds from a person who's lost their limb below the knee. So these are plaster casts. Sometimes we use synthetic casting materials. And there's also a way to do this type of thing using digital scanning too, which is becoming more and more popular. You can see some markings in here that they're going to show different bony landmarks or anatomical landmarks that we need to know when we're fabricating these things. So once we get this negative mold made from the patient, and these molds are placed into these sandboxes, and we mix up these big buckets of plaster. This is actually dental plaster. Dental plaster is then poured into the mold, and we use this pipe as a handle, if you will, and then you can see this has been filled solid with plaster of Paris. Once that's been filled solid with plaster of Paris and gone off, these molds are brought over here to this modifying area, and this is where the molds are modified. And by modified, I mean this is how we reshape them. So here's one that's being done right now. You can still see some of the indelible pencil markings on here. And what happens is the practitioner, the person who's designing this device and designing this, especially this interface part, the socket that goes between the residual limb and the prosthesis, we use these hand tools. And the hand tools are used basically to carve away plaster where you want to add pressure. And then we're going to add plaster. You see the different colors over here. We're going to reduce pressure. And when the final result is done, you see this device that has a very specific shape. And the shape has everything to do with where pressures are applied and where they're not. Once these devices are all modified, we'll pan over here to Gary just for a sec. So you see Gary's adding plaster in certain areas on an AFO. And that's going to reduce the pressure on the medial side of his foot there, where exactly he's working. There's a lot of art in what we do, and we like to say we're combining science, art, and compassion when we're making orthoses and prostheses. And this is a lot of the science and the art part here blended in, where you can typically tell someone's work just by the shape when you know it well enough. We're going to be going into these other laboratories in order of sequence and show you how these things are made.